Hi, welcome to this episode of the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. My guest today is Kelly Williams. Kelly has been the artist for the comics The Cabinet, Metaphase. He has done work for Eerie and Creepy magazine, and his current series is The Dark and Frolic with Cullen Bunn currently on Patreon. Kelly, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you did the band. You were pretty threatening in the letter. I should have reported it to police, but I do like you, so I figured it's all in stride.
I only want what I got coming to me.
So, again, welcome. First question I always ask, yes, comics, coffee, metal. What was your first experience with each one of those?
What was that?
Comics, coffee, and metal. What was your first experience with each one of those?
Gotcha.
If you care to expound.
Well, let me see. I honestly don't remember what the first comic I ever got was. It's been so long. I remember the first ones that meant something to me, of course. Like Rights and Swamp Thing was a huge deal for me. Or I should say him and Ween. But yeah, and like.
No, writers get enough credit. Fuck them.
Yeah, that's true. Fuck those dudes. But yeah, that and a lot of like horror anthology comics and stuff. Those were the things that really kind of got me, Yeah. But at the same time, like I was real big into the X-Men and like Daredevil and stuff when like in the 80s. I mean, I still like those things, but those were like my superhero comics that I really, got into. As far as metal goes, I don't even really remember. I lived in a trailer park. And the guy that lived next door, there was like this teenage dude that lived next door to me. And he was like super into like heavy metal and stuff. And I think I was just starting to figure out that I was like, music was pretty cool or whatever. And beyond like, hey, I like Michael Jackson, and like I had started to kind of discover punk a little bit, but like then I started like I think this guy kind of introduced me to stuff like I don't know, probably like Metallica and Megadeth and stuff like that. And so then like I got like super into that. And then it turned into this thing where the more satanic the imagery, the more into it I was. So, that's kind of how that started, I guess. Okay. And coffee, I don't remember.
That's all right.
I don't remember the first. I think it's kind of sad that I can't remember the first cup of coffee I ever drank. Like it seems like something I should be able to remember because it's such a huge part of my life now. I don't do things without it, and it's one of the few things that like my doctor was like, you should probably cut back. And I'm like, well, you just mind your own business. I'll take care of it. But yeah, I don't remember. I know I was kind of young, but probably not as young as some people. Like, I was probably 12 or 13 maybe when I first.
Okay, that seems about right. Yeah. First time you sneak your first cup of coffee and like, what is
this?
Oh,
I didn't sneak it. I was just like, I'm going to drink coffee. And yeah, I don't know. Or I think maybe I was hanging out with some people that were drinking coffee. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to drink coffee too. And I don't remember if I liked it or if I didn't like it. Like, I totally don't remember what my impression was. I just, now I just know that I still drink it. So I must not have hated it. Maybe there was something to this whole coffee lifestyle. The living on the edge, get up and go.
Man about town.
Yeah. There's something.
Coffee cup in hand. I got stuff to do, guys.
There's something very artsy and metropolitan about coffee.
Have you ever tried any of the Death Wish coffee stuff?
I haven't. I'm a very I'm trying to think of how to explain this. Like I see it and I'm like, I'm into that. You know, I
Hmm.
like what they got going on there. I'm also a very like, and in no way do I think that this is an endearing quality that I have, but I'm a very grumpy guy that the more I see people talk about things, the less I want to do with it. And that is like the dumbest fucking thing, but I get like I'm moody.
Okay.
I get like so when I see everybody going on about, yeah, I got my Death Wish coffee, I'm like,
Hmm.
is it really that good though? I mean, they were all like, this is the comic coffee, you know, like
Yeah.
is it that good? And that's unfair to them because they probably make a really great coffee, and I'm just like, eh.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Well, usually when there's something that people are just like touting as this amazing next coming of whatever, and I try it, read it, try it, eat it, whatever, and I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's it's fine. It's a
I
shit ton of caffeine I get.
also honestly, the main reason I've probably never had any of the Death Wish stuff is because I can't just go buy it.
Yeah, you
Like
gotta
because
order
I
it,
have
and
to
it's like,
order it, I'm like, you know, there's
yeah,
other things I can order. I can order a record. I don't, you know, I can go to the grocery store and get coffee.
yeah, yeah. Like, the coffee we get, it's like we get like one bag a week, and it's like $7 when it's not on sale.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even then, I'm like,
yeah.
but
Is that Death Wish or just in general?
no, just
Whatever you
the
drink.
whatever they drink. Yeah, it's I looked at the Death Wish, and it's like, I think the last time I looked it was like $20 or
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's
almost
expensive.
$30 for like a pound, and I'm like, I'm I'm not that interested.
I don't want to spend $20 because it has a skull on the
Yeah,
package. You know,
because Zach Wilde's endorsing it doesn't mean I'm like, oh yeah, that's worth an extra $15, what it probably actually
does
is
he?
worth.
Does he endorse that?
He's got his own Valhalla Java blend or whatever, or Odin
Huh,
Floor blend or whatever,
strange.
whatever it is with him.
I
But
mean, you know, that's great. I'm sure. And you know, to be fair, I may have had Death Wish coffee, and I just don't even realize it. You know, like I'm not. I love coffee, and I like coffee a certain way, but
yeah,
I would say I'm in no way a coffee snob.
no,
Like
I
I'm
agree. I
not
agree.
all like fucking, you know, I gotta have this and it's got. And when I go to if I go to a coffee shop, like I'm very much that fucking guy that's just like I just want a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to have to say anything other than a cup of coffee. And like
No special blends, just what's in that pot there. Put it
yeah,
in the cup.
you know, the occasional like, espresso or something, but like I'm and you know some of it is like I'm like there's just too much of that shit and like I don't want to spend time learning any of it. Like, I've got a buddy who he was a barista for a while and he's very knowledgeable about this stuff.
Yeah.
And when we go to the coffee shop, like he always orders I mean, he probably doesn't order complicated things, but because it's not just a cup of coffee, I'm like, just hurry up so I can order my coffee. And I remember, like, there was a point where when I'd go to coffee shops and I would just say I just want, a cup of coffee, like, it would always turn into this thing. You know, it's like, oh, what do you want? You know, and I'm like, no, I don't. So I'm glad to see that that's kind of like waned a little bit, and now I can go to a coffee shop and just say I want a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and those give you whatever's
Nobody's
the
nobody's
combo.
pushing me to like do anything different.
Yeah.
I
Try our new East Sumatran blend.
I feel like such a just an old grumpy guy. I'm like, I just want a cup of coffee. I'm that guy that's like a parody of what I am, like in a TV
I think
show.
there's more people like you than you realize. I
Oh
think
no,
just
I
a lot
know.
of it is just
No.
we're just curious by nature, and if coffee is a thing that we're just so used to every day, and like, oh, here's this new variation of it, which I'll be 100% honest, I can taste differences in coffees,
Sure.
but it's
Yeah.
not so much where I'm like, oh, it's more oh, this is the type of kind of roast or whatever I like. But
Right. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if you're telling me like, oh, we only got a dark roast and I just want a cup of coffee, I'm not going to be like, well, how dare you? I want
Right.
this special medium light roast. Like it's, but no, I get it, it's our nature because we just want to, we want what our stuff to be special,
Sure.
whatever
Sure.
it is we're having, if it's down to the coffee. And
There's something about
now it's down to the
knowing
milks.
something. What was that?
Now it's down to the milks. Because
Oh,
before you just had like half and half, 2%, and now it's like almond milk or cashew milk, now oat milk, and like
for the record, almond milk is the way to go. But
I like almond milk with like iced coffee. I think that really works. I haven't tried oat milk. I heard it's tasty, but it's just one of those things where it's like my life is not lesser or better for it existing, I guess.
I only say the almond milk thing because I just don't like drinking milk. Like
Yeah.
I don't. It's just a thing. I don't really like milk. So, and the only time I ever use even fake milk in anything is it fake milk? I mean, it's milk, right? But it's just coming from a different source.
It's water, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really just water.
Yeah.
But I guess almond water in your coffee sounds worse than
Doesn't sound
almond
as
milk.
appetizing.
Yeah. So,
Here's some almond juice. Uh,
last I checked, almonds don't have teeth. So,
right, right. Uh,
but I could be wrong.
but yeah, so I mean, I only really ever use it in coffee, and I rarely use it in coffee. So
Yeah.
I'm more of a straight black guy.
Okay.
Not, I'm a straight white guy, but you know what I mean.
I don't think we're going to get confused.
Yeah, no,
This is a video podcast, by the way.
just oh yeah, right, okay. I forgot about that. So okay. Uh, yeah, so coffee's good, and oh, I remember what I was gonna say. I wouldn't say that I'm somebody that can taste the difference between coffees and stuff. Not generally. I mean, if I think about it, maybe, but like, I will say that I think that you can taste the difference between like organic coffee and non-organic coffee.
Okay.
I
Well,
mean, at least I think so.
I don't think I've actually had like tasted like the difference or like sat down and like tried to compare.
I feel like it's less acidic, but it could also just be me convincing myself that that's how it is, and like,
There could be something to do that. I do like a less acidic, and my wife prefers something more acidic, I guess.
right.
So, yeah.
Well,
Cool.
good.
So it's funny you mentioned the teenage guy next to you introducing you to metal because that's kind of how I got introduced into metal too. There's a guy
That's how
across
a
the
lot
street
of
from
people
me.
got into metal.
Yeah, that teenage guy across the street,
Right.
the shifty looking teenager. Um, he was running away, and he had the Metallica Black Album CD, and he's like, I need money. Sold this to you for $5, and
Oh, nice.
I'm like, what, 10, 11 at this point.
Right.
It hasn't been out for that long, and I'm like, I got $3, and you know, he's like, fine, fine, here. So I had it, but it just kind of sat there. Like, it was like the only CD I had for like 5 or 6 years, and then it wasn't even like the first one I would listen to or anything like that. So,
Right.
well, to my mid-teens, so I was in the metal. But
I think it was Master of Puppets
okay,
that was out at the time that he that I like met this kid. That seems right. Yeah, it must have been because I was already listening to him when Injustice for All came out. So
yeah.
I don't remember the time.
Master was around 86, 86.
Yeah,
So
like I can't remember the exact span of time from when I discovered them to when Injustice for All came out, but I know it was at least a few months. I mean, it was probably a good year or so. But like uh, but it's like the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I was already listening to a few things though, because I was already super into Iron Maiden
okay,
at that point, and I think maybe this guy like kind of introduced me to like the more thrashy stuff.
okay,
That seems about right. Because I think I discovered Iron Maiden from like just heavy metal magazines, like going to the grocery store and
I mean,
yeah,
they looked awesome. Like, how could you not be
that's
interested?
okay. That's totally what it was. Because I ended up just buying a Rip magazine. Like, if you know what Rip magazine is?
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember how long ago it stopped being a thing, but
If
yeah,
I can
so
dig up an image of a mid '80s Rip magazine with Iron Maiden, I'll make sure
sure.
to pop it on there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, so I think it was like we were going to the laundromat or something, and so I was looking at comics and stuff just to have something to do, and then there was a Rip magazine. I don't even remember what was on the cover. Like it was probably fucking Rat or something, but like flipping through it, there was all that cool, like there were all those ads for like, or all those things where you could like mail order T-shirts,
Hmm.
or those fucking those wall banner things,
Yeah, yeah. The tapestries
and
and all that.
yeah, yeah, and like the shit you could buy at flea markets and stuff is like poorly screened and everything, but they'd sell a zillion of them, and they'd be on like really bad silk looking
It's like
like,
Metallica with one L.
yeah, yeah, and like there was a point where I was going through those things and I would try bands based on that. I think
Oh,
that's how I started listening to like the Dead Kennedys and stuff. Was I saw
okay.
like, their logo like was in there, and I was like, for some reason the name Dead Kennedy sounded really cool to me, so I was like, yeah, what's that all about? And so I think, yeah, I was, oddly enough, I think Rip Magazine might have actually been more of my gateway into punk than metal because it seemed like I listened to a lot of things based off of seeing just imagery in there. And but Iron Maiden was like one of those bands that like I was definitely drawn to the imagery. Like that was the thing that got me interested in them. Like I probably owned an Iron Maiden record and didn't even really care if I ever listened to it at first, I was only worried about just being able to look at the art and stuff because I just, that stuff was great. And in fact, I remember I the first I got like Number of the Beast was like the first Iron Maiden record I got, and that was also, I mean, that's where I discovered them at, was on that. And I thinking about the fact that like I went to a store with my mom. Can't remember what it's called. It was like Alco or something. It was. I don't even. I only ever went to the music section, so I don't even really know what else they had in there. But maybe they had groceries. I don't know. But anyway, so I was in there looking at like sets, and they had Killers and the first Iron Maiden record,
Okay.
and like on cassette, and like I had never heard those. I had heard like I was very familiar with Killers, obviously, but like at that point, that first Iron Maiden album was like this was brand new to me. Like I didn't even know about it, and I was all out of sorts because Eddie looked completely different and everything. So I was very excited about it.
Yeah.
So I stole them. I took them and I put them in my pants and I took them home. And then I listened to them and was so like so disappointed because I had no idea that there was another Iron Maiden vocalist before Bruce Dickinson at that point. And so like I hated him, and
Yeah.
so of course I risked getting in trouble for these things that I didn't even like. And of course now I totally like those records and I think they're great. And they're their own thing or whatever. But yeah, when I was a kid, when it wasn't him and it was just something entirely different, I was like,
Yeah.
that is crazy. Why would you do that? So that's actually probably
Okay.
more my introduction to metal
Okay.
was that. But I didn't go all in on it until the teenage guy.
Okay. Yeah. Something that's been coming up is every episode is kind of like the Venn diagram of metal because it's my belief that metal has kind of transcended being a genre and it's more of a medium at this point because there's so many variations.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, "Oh yeah, I listen to metal," and I'm talking about like Nightwish or something like that, and someone else is talking about like Behemoth or Mayhem or something like that, and it's like
Slip.
those, yeah, or yeah, someone's talking about Slipknot and Korn, and
Yeah.
it's, but I think we kind of Patrick Guy and I in the first episode, I think we kind of assume that everyone kind of starts in one's like from like one's middle part, and I think that's the big four: Slayer, Anthrax, Metallica, Megadeth. Like, sure,
Sure.
you might have your bands that you like more, and they're just outliers. Like you first started listening to Iron Maiden, but like you didn't really get into it until like Master of Puppets and all that. And that kind of, I'm sure you kind of branched out from there because you got into the thrashier stuff. And
Sure.
I know
That's
I
fair.
know our personal Venn diagrams of metal don't overlap a ton, I think. I think maybe with thrashier bands, stuff I like and stuff you
Sure.
like. But I know you kind of go more hardcore into like the is it Death Black or do you
I don't know, man. Like,
whatever
I,
it's called,
I
whatever
like
it's
black
called,
metal
what
and death
Death
metal,
Black
but
is
I like grindcore and
right?
you
Okay.
know, I don't know. I try to like honestly, I've come to realize like just the grosser and dirtier it sounds, the more I'm into it. Like,
Okay.
I don't know.
Which
Like,
I totally get. I totally get, especially since you also are a big fan of punk music
right, right.
and
And
just
those,
that
yeah, yeah.
and
And
that
grindcore
lo-fi.
definitely
Yeah.
fits that
There.
like idea. At least a lot of it does,
uh,
anyways.
Did it's really interesting to hear you say that you're kind of like to try bands you're scanning the imagery. Do you feel that's kind of like what eventually led you to path to like doing art,
Oh
as
yeah,
your
absolutely.
main passion? And it's like, were your notebooks just like filled with eddies and
Oh yeah.
logos and fake band
I had
covers?
trapper keepers that were just like where I took a razor blade and cut the clear plastic,
Yeah,
and then you like draw the logos and stuff and like paste them up inside it.
yeah,
Like I think there was like in my school like there was like this group of us that like just had these
yeah.
like all of our trapper keepers looked pretty much exactly the same but had different bands and it was really interesting then too because I spent a lot of time growing up in Arkansas, in the same little fucking town that I still live in right now. And like it's weird because like I actually moved here from right outside of Chicago.
Okay.
And but I'm originally from Spokane, Washington, but it's a
Okay.
long sorted thing. But anyways, so I came down here, and then it was after I got here that I started to get into to metal and punk and skateboarding and all that, which is weird because none of that stuff was around here. Like,
Yeah.
and the internet wasn't here, so it was totally like this thing where I was instantly branded a devil worshiper. Keep in mind, like I'm in sixth grade or something, and
Yeah,
I'm being
it's
branded by adults like a devil worshiper because it was in the middle of all that satanic panic
yeah.
sense and everything. And of course, I was all into the stuff that they like been like that about and D and all that shit.
Mhm.
Uh, so school was super super terrible like for a while because there was like a handful of us that were into this stuff,
Mhm.
but everybody hated us because
You're devil
especially
worshippers.
especially in this like small southern like religious community, like it's like thinking back on it, it's insane how like they didn't have access to anything, or they
Yeah.
did but they just chose not to. And so because they had allowed themselves to be cut off the way they did, like when I talk to people about this stuff, about that time period, and everybody talks about what it was like, and I realize like there's almost a certain, like, at least in most conversations that I have with a lot of people, like I know there's other people that had the same kind of experience, but like how bad mine was fairly unique because I think a lot of people were still like in communities where it was a little larger, you know, maybe. And so like there was some kind of outside source or whatever. It wasn't like it wasn't a thing where adults were looking at 10-year-olds and saying that's a devil worshiper because he's got a Slayer t-shirt on or whatever. I got sent home from school on picture day because I had a Slayer Root of All Evil t-shirt, which at the time it had a big demon head that glue in the dark, and it had like the
Okay.
pentagram in the background, and then it just said you know, Root of All Evil or something on the back. But I got sent home, and then
Okay.
a year or 2 years later, I got sent home on picture day again because I had on the Bad Religion shirt with the cross crossed out,
Okay.
and so it was a long time that people were like that.
Oh,
But
very
yeah,
sensitive.
anyways, right. Sorry, I got off track there.
No.
But
Uh,
yeah, uh, I would definitely say, especially metal, like played. There was probably a point, like in terms of triggering my interest in art, like wanting to draw things and stuff.
yeah.
Metal was probably more of a prominent factor in that than comic books. Like
Okay.
I don't think I really, and I've talked about this before, like um it wasn't until I got that first issue of Swamp Thing that I ever even considered comic books as something that there's a person that draws these, you know, like I read them, that was about it. I didn't really give it much thought, but for some reason this comic like stuck out to me and made me like, and I think some of it was because I recognized that I'd seen rights and stuff in other places, like in
Okay.
books and creepy and eerie, you know, like I started to put together that this one person was responsible for all these different things. And so then that's when I started, that's probably when I got like more into the idea of drawing. But
Hmm.
the thing that kind of triggered me drawing more often than not before that was definitely metal stuff.
Okay. Cool. And you've done some album covers for people in the past, haven't you?
I've done a couple. I mean, I haven't done a ton, but I did one that looked really great for a band out of Little Rock. Uh,
I think that's the one I'm thinking of
what was it
that when
called?
I was aware of you that you did.
Right. The Weeping Gate, I think is what they're called.
Okay.
And I did that, and I did a cover for the Pounder 7-inch that came out like last year, which they're about to release a new record that's the album cover is way better than when I put together that 7-inch. But and that's Matt Harvey, who's from like Exhumed and stuff, who also wrote Howl, that I did the story I did for the Dark or whatever. Um, and then I'm trying to push on doing more show posters and stuff. Like I did that one for the Mountain
Okay.
Goats, and I just did one for a TSOL show in St. Louis later this year. But I those are fun to do. Like I just kind of want to do more of those. Like uh, especially the whole screen printing thing. Like they look all nice and everything.
Yeah.
So like I'm super into that. But yeah, I want to do more music stuff for sure. I think I've realized a roadblock in that for me is like doing show posters is I live in a place where there's nothing. Like
Okay.
like if I want to go to a show, I have to travel like at least an hour at best,
Oh, okay.
up to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And we're talking about places like for me, I have to go to like Memphis, Tennessee, or outside of that, the next closest place I would go to see somebody is probably like St. Louis, Little Rock, or Nashville, and those are all like three hours away.
Yeah, yeah, I know whenever you're like near Chicago, you're always looking for shows
Yeah.
to
Oh
try
yeah.
to hit up because you're like, I'm up here, might as well,
Sure.
do
Yeah.
something.
I I I actually come to Chicago for shows way more than I should. I mean, I got tickets to that Jawbox reunion show that's there in I think it's July, or whatever that is. But yeah, so like a lot of stuff like that. The only way I can really catch it is if I go to Chicago, and I like Chicago, so I don't really mind doing. It's fine. But uh, we definitely did it way too much for a little while. Like
Okay.
there was a point where we went to like 4 or 5 shows in Chicago in a year,
All
and
right. It's a lot of
like
traveling.
yeah, when you say it, it doesn't sound so bad. But then you also have to factor in that I'm traveling to do conventions and stuff in the
Yeah.
middle of all that, and it's just like, oh, it was such a terrible idea. But anyways, yeah. So because I have to travel to these other communities to go see shows, like I feel like it's harder to get on the radar for these venues to like do posters and stuff because they
Yeah.
already have their scene, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
probably already have people that are part of their community and their scene. And I'm weird about I don't want to like come just like, hey, let me in here. Let me do this. You've got no reason to, but let me do it.
Yeah.
So, I try to let things happen naturally in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of wild to see how many actual comic artists actually do like the concert posters and things like that. Because this past year, Brent Schoonover, Jenny Frison, and Robert Wilson all did Metallica posters, which is
Yep.
like mind blowing to me. Like they're all fantastic artists and well deserved that they got the
Well, and
opportunity to
that's
do that.
also because it's
It's
all going
just
through Nakatomi or whatever the printmaker is.
okay.
Like, I think that's part. I think maybe he put that together but he works with comic artists and stuff a lot.
Yeah, which
I mean, it makes sense,
is
and they're all
yes,
really
yeah.
good. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a reason why it makes sense.
They're painfully good.
Yeah.
Um, so it's one of the things I like about your art style is that it's unique. I see a drawing online. I know it's Kelly, but also that you can cover such a wide berth of genres with your style. You've done all ages stuff. You've done super horror stuff and all this stuff in between. And I was wondering if that's just is there a huge shift in like your mental thinking when you're approaching drawing for like an all ages versus something more adult oriented outside the standard like, oh, I can't show that, like
Oh,
is there
yeah.
more of a thought process behind the style, like you have very expressive faces and very you can exaggerate characters really well, but you can also do some like really like beautiful, realistic, watercolor type stuff, and you mix that really well. So I was wondering if there's something like different pieces fit together differently with what you do for different genres, or it's just kind of you know you do what you do and you don't really think too much outside of the limitations of the rating, so to speak.
Right. I mean, I think. Well, I mean, first, thanks. I guess. Um, I mean, I think that. I mean, obviously, you got to kind of shift the way you think about things when you're doing, something that's like the difference between doing metaphase
Yes.
and uh, the cabinet, like for example, because I did both. Like I was working on both of those simultaneously, And and like for me, part of what made that work was I did the cabinet traditional, the whole thing's ink on paper, ink wash and everything. And Metaphase I did 100% digital, and I didn't do any of that on paper. It was all done digitally, and I did that on purpose a little bit because I figured that would help me stay in the right headspace when I was
Okay.
working on, I knew that I was going to probably skew a little cleaner and a little more cartoony if I did it digitally, which is what it needed. And now I bounce around a lot easier between the different things. Generally speaking, I mean, I still have moments where I think I need to be a little less exaggerated when I'm doing this, but my head's still in that game over here, so it's hard for
Yeah.
me to, switch. But I've been thinking about it more now than I used to, and I think some of that's just because I I've been juggling a lot more in the last couple years. Like I might have a project I'm working on, but then, in order to not feel like I'm not going to make any money, I might like work on a couple other smaller things. And so, there's a whole lot of like in and out like kind of stuff. I like right now I'm drawing like the next story for the dark, which that's all horror.
Yeah.
And it's like in a abandoned house. Like the whole thing takes place in this abandoned house, so it's dark and dreary and all that. And then simultaneously, I'm doing this other short thing that's part of a Dark Horse thing, and that is all it's all animals and it's all real bright colors. And so I'm kind of bouncing back and forth on both of
Okay.
those. And so and that one's like all watercolor and stuff too. So like it's it's something that like when I do it, like I actually have been trying to like break it up. So like I like say I work on the dark story, uh like and I'm inking that or something. Like instead of just being done with that and then going straight over to like say ink something that's completely different, I'll break it up and plan it so that I'll work on layouts for that other thing first, just to kind of help my mind
Yeah, because
get into
layout brain
that
is
mode.
different than inking brain, and
Right. And
it's
because I
different
think,
modes. Yeah.
I think if I was to ink them both simultaneously, one would probably end up with more of something it shouldn't have. Going back and forth between them, it's, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not hard, but it's it's um it's not something that I guess I feel like I need to think about a ton
Okay.
usually. I mean, I suppose to the same effect. On top of all that, in the middle of all that, I was also drawing this Nasquatch story for the free comic book day book,
Oh
and
yeah,
the
Nasquatch.
and that's more cartoony than the other two things.
Okay.
Like, I mean, it's more of a simple. Well, I don't know, but yeah, it's more. It's a little more bright and cartoony than the other one. So
Can you talk a little bit about Nasquatch?
yeah,
It's coming out on Free Comic Book Day, which is May 4th this year.
right.
And yeah, it looks. I'm gonna show up some images to show some people now, but if you can talk a little bit about how that came about, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I made a really stupid joke one day and drew this picture of a Sasquatch dressed in a racing uniform and called him Nasquatch. And honestly, when I did it, it was just I laughed at it in the moment and was like, "This is
Yeah.
great." And but then people really liked that. For like even the NASCAR like Instagram account was like all talking about it, and sharing it, and I'm like, that's crazy. But yeah, so I started writing some of it, like I started putting something together, but I was in the middle of other stuff. This was a couple years ago now, probably. I got busy working on a graphic novel and then some other stuff. And there'd be occasional talks about, like, I should do something with this. So then I started talking to, I was working with Brendan Wright, the editor, who I was working with him on A Letter to Joe at the time. And we started talking about Nasquatch and the idea of pursuing it as more of a actual project. And because I was so busy with other stuff, I didn't know that I was going to really be able to swing writing and drawing another thing.
Yeah.
So I talked to C.W. Cook about coming on and helping me write it. And then it kind of just, I don't know, it fell off again just as a, it's not that it like stopped, but in terms of it having a home, it just kind of piddled out for a little while. Everybody got busy with other things. And then Brendan was working with SBI Press, and which is part of Starburn Industries, which is like the Rick and Morty, all that stuff. And so we pitched it over there and got it picked up. And we got we're doing a digital series deal, basically. It'll be like, I think the idea is it'll be 10-page installments. Okay. It'll come out digital first, and then once it's done, if everything goes well, it'll be collected.
Okay.
And then the first introductory thing is this Free Comic Book Day thing. It's part of the Starburn Industries Free Comic Book Day book or whatever, which I also did the cover for. But so I made sure that Nasquatch was, prominent. But and there's some really good stuff. I mean, there's stroke of stuff in the book, like the stories that I've seen, there's some sci-fi stuff and everything's everything's unique to itself and everything. Everything looks like its own thing, and it's all good. So it's cool to be involved.
I think with that. Well, one, it's free, so that's easy sell. Who's not gonna love that?
Well, that's the other thing is I hate saying this, and I say it half jokingly, but kind of dead serious. 90% of anybody that's sold on this are sold on it by the name alone, just the name alone pretty much gets people yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to waste that, something like that. And
well, knowing you and the level of talent you have and all that, the name is just a big.
I'm honestly more worried about living up to the name at this point, because.
Well, that's good. That's good. You're not resting on any laurels,
right?
For that.
So yeah. So after that, I'm probably the worst salesman on this stuff. I think the idea is that by the time the Free Comic Book Day thing comes out in May, we should have one or two available on Comixology by then, hopefully. I think that's the plan anyways. I mean, you would think I would know since I'm kind of co-writing and drawing it, and I don't have a clue when it's due, but it'll be available. It'll be out.
Just set your Google alert for Nasquatch.
Yeah.
That's it. There you go.
There's probably not a ton of Nasquatch stuff. I'm also doing Nasquatch t-shirts.
Oh, okay.
And just something that I'm going to print at home. I've got a screen print, and I'm only going to sell them at shows. And it's one of those things that I was I don't know, it seems kind of dumb to do before people even see the comic. But then again,
I think you'll sell it just with people who have even no interest in the comic, just the name alone, like you said.
So I'm doing it's like a tour shirt basically. So
okay.
which is part of why I'm only going to sell it at shows and stuff. But
Now, by the time this episode goes up, C2E2 may have already passed, but will you be having them there?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
My goal is to have them all ready in time for Emerald City, which is the week before C2E2. So.
Okay.
But so yeah, so Sasquatch, go check it out, man.
Sasquatch 2019.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned another project you're working on called Letters to Joe.
A Letter to Joe, yes.
A Letter to Joe, I'm sorry.
It is a letter. It is a singular letter. And I only hammer that home because it is, in fact, about a singular letter. So,
okay. A Letter to Joe.
Yeah,
I've seen you posted up into this for quite some time. It's a war comic, seemingly. So yeah, I'm glad that it's something that we'll be able to read because it looks really interesting. So again, if you could let us know a little bit about that.
I can. I am excited for that to come out, I guess. As excited as I get. Yeah, it comes out in August. I don't know the exact date, but I know it's August of this year. Because, it's been a while. Like,
Publishing's weird too. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. It got picked up last year. About this time, actually, we signed the contract for it. But it's coming out through Top Shelf. But,
that's awesome.
Works. Obviously, Top Shelf at that point had already had their 2019 schedule or 2018 schedule pretty locked down. So, we just had to wait until there was an opening. But even before that, like, the book had been done for a little while, and not long, but a little while. And like I feel bad for the writer, Joe Siraki, because like he was pretty much done writing it like a good year before I came on, and then we kept having different things, like between I was moving, the editor had moved to Germany, and there were just little things, so it took longer to get finished than we had hoped. So for him, this is probably even more than it would have anyways. Going to be a huge relief when it finally comes out. But yeah, so it's actually about his grandparents. His grandfather was in the army in World War II. And so the story basically is about his grandparents meeting and then him having to go off to war immediately after they got married. And the story basically, it follows this one super long letter he sent back right before he came home, where he kind of just talked about everything he had been through. And I think it was because because the war was pretty much over at that point, so they could talk about whatever and they didn't have to worry about if things got intercepted and stuff like that. So this is kind of an adaptation of that letter, and but it like bounces back and forth between what he's going through in the war and where he's at, and what his wife Joe is going through at home, being a young woman worried sick about her husband and missing him terribly and going through everything she's going through, having to just live her day-to-day life. And so yeah, I mean it's kind of a war romance kind of thing, I guess, and it's really good, and it's cool because it's like a very personal story because, like I said, it's about Joe. The writer's name is Joe as well, but this isn't about him. It's about his grandmother Joe, and but it's about his grandparents. So it's cool to be involved with something that's like that personal, but that like it was cool because he was open to certain liberties and things like that, and it was a good experience. But I'm excited for people to finally get to see it because well, for one, for me, it's a different thing. I mean, well, like I said, it's a love war story. I don't think I've done any of those before this. Um, and I did the whole ink and watercolor thing on it, and I think this will be the first long book that I did that on. So, that's cool. And there's parts of that book I'm very proud of. Like, I'm proud of the work that I did on it and stuff. So, and there's other stuff in the book as well. Like, there's an adaptation of a poem that his grandfather wrote. Uh, it's illustrated by somebody different. I feel terrible. I can't remember who it was now. But and then there's some other excerpts from the letter, and there's some old photos and things like that. So it's a nice little package for what it is. And
Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be, and it's coming through Top Shelf, so it's gonna be, top shelf
yeah, I'm excited
quality
to
and
see
things like
that
that.
too.
So it's
They put out good quality books, so like I'm excited to see this thing once it finally is in my hand and stuff. And I like Top Shelf. I mean, they're good company. They make good stuff. So
yeah,
it's
they're
cool
very
to be involved with that.
yeah, yeah, awesome. One of the things you've kind of mentioned a little bit throughout the episode here is your series The Dark, which is a short form, like single issue story series that you kind of do when you get, because you have tons of projects going on all at once, and sometimes, I'm sure you feel like I don't have enough to do. I need to get this dark story done too. So,
Well, yeah.
um, but that's but the stories for that have been some of the, the favorite things I've seen from you. And you have guest writers come on and do all that. Um, so was there an initial impetus between doing the dark, or is it just kind of you know, I have the short story from somebody or in mind, and I just need to get it out. So let me create this banner of the dark so I can get this out. Because the covers are very unique and distinctive, and gorgeous and terrifying. So I was wondering if it was if yeah if the impetus of the dark was just you need to get that little pressure release of these little things out, or if it was just something that was more of a whim to start.
Well, like I love making comics, but my first love is like I love doing horror comics. Like I mean, I love horror, and like it's the thing I really like to do. And it honestly, like, it's more of it started like completely as a thing that I just wanted to do it to have something um that was just something that I could do, like something for me that I enjoyed, something that was fun for me, and they would let me kind of get back into the writing like thing a little bit too. And so I came up with the story for Boo Hag, which is the first one, and I did it, and my intention was always to just I would do them, and then I'd probably put it up online for free, and then I might do mini comics or something. And then once I did it and once it came out, like at the time, I was still involved with Alterna, and Peter had said something about wanting to do something with it, and I was like, well, you know, at first I didn't know because I didn't really want to. I didn't want to charge for it,
Mm-hmm.
But then, after we talked a little bit, I was like, well, okay, like $1 on Comixology seems okay.
Yeah.
And so, and it kept it, and we made a deal so that I was still able to just do my uh, self-published mini comics of it, and Alternative didn't have anything to do with it. It was a really good like setup at first, and largely that ended up not working out more because like my schedule for it just couldn't keep up with what it was he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was very understanding about all of it, but I eventually realized that, like, there were a lot of factors at that point, like,
Yeah.
that made it so that I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I decided to take it and go back to it just being free online and doing the mini comics and stuff. But anyway, so the I did Boo Hag, and I was really like, I got really excited. People liked it, and I was like really into the idea of doing it as a regular thing that I would do just kind of for fun. And I did kind of screw up by doing the deal with having a publisher involved, because as soon as you put a schedule on it, it's like, now I got to worry about that. And that's not them, that's me. I kind of just lost track of the fact that I wanted to do it for fun. But because of that, I started realizing that, I mean, you know how it is. You talk to tons of people. You make friends with lots of people, and lots of people that write, lots of writers, and you probably have lots of conversations about all the different projects you guys could do, and like, we got to work together sometime and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And nobody ever manages to nail down the time to actually do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I started realizing, like, well, if people are interested, I could do that with the dark, and then people can come on and just write these like short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a short thing, like, we should all be able to find a minute to fit it in somewhere, and
Yeah.
do that. So where it was supposed to be me by myself, I changed to doing that, and I'm really like happy that I did, because the amount of people they wanted to contribute to it, it's a lot, and there's a lot of good friends and a lot of great writers that are interested in contributing to it. And so far, there's only been like 3, but like, so far, I worked with Matt Harvey, who, again, better known for his musical stuff, with like Exhumed and um, uh, Gruesome and so on. But and it was like his first comic thing, and it was fun to do that, and it was fun to work with him, especially being a fan of the bands that he's like in and stuff. And then the next one, which was Devil's Gate. I always forget that. That was written by Jim Gibbons, who, great writer. He Great editor.
Mm-hmm.
He's been an editor with a lot of places, and great guy. And he wrote a great story that's actually kind of based somewhere outside of Chicago, I think. Like, it's in that area. Like,
Yeah.
it's based on a local legend. And then this new one that I'm working on right now, I decided to go ahead and write this one and draw it myself, because I've after I took it, or left Alterna with it, I decided to I talked to Source Point Press, who, it's great guys, and me and Christian worked with them on the reissue of the cabinet and stuff, and so I'm gonna do the dark through them in print, and so it's kind of the same deal. Like, I'm gonna basically, every 4 stories they're gonna put out a collected.
Okay.
That's an issue that collects 4 stories. So that's part of why I decided to write and draw this one. Was That's the 4th one, so it kind of opens and closes with me doing that. And then in the next set, I'll likely do it'll all be different writers. Like, I won't write any of them probably. Um, but we do that. I don't know when that'll come. It'll be later this year that the collected of that'll come out. But
Yeah, that sounds like a smarter way to approach it, I think. To have, you do it your way, and then once you have enough for a
oh yeah,
collection, if for,
they're
so they
they're
can use the resources and
exceptionally great about just letting me decide how I want to do it, to the point that um, I mean, I'm still going to be doing the self-published mini comics of them, and so it'll be available that way.
mhm.
And then they'll do all the collected stuff. Be good. Oh, that the cat's walking through, and she's eating it.
Yeah.
Um, wait, but so, but then so like all of the all three of the ones that are already done like are available free digitally to read on the Circle Pit Press site. And then when this one's finished, it'll just go straight up on the Circle Pit Press site.
Okay.
So, and it's cool because like they're totally down with letting me do that however I want to do it. If I was to decide I wanted to do the same thing and make it $1 and put it on Comixology through them, they would do that. Like they left it up to me completely, and
That's
it's
awesome, man.
it's great to work with somebody that's that cool about it. And I'm excited about the idea of the collecteds because uh, I think originally the idea was that there would be like every 10 we would do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea, but probably going to be like 15 years
Yeah.
before it comes out.
And the dark, it averages around, if I recall correctly, around 10, 12 pages each, if I'm
Uh,
not mistaken.
if I pad it out, yeah. Like,
Or eight, somewhere in
it's
there.
probably
So
8 to 10 pages generally.
okay.
Um, I think one made it to 12 pages, but that was with pinups and stuff.
Okay. But even then, four issues put together, that's a nice oversized size, you know, comic to collect. That's a hefty read,
Yeah,
especially if you got four different stories and yeah.
I like the idea. Hold on a second. Now,
Kitty.
she's acting like she's gonna jump and break stuff if I don't pick her up, and now the
Okay.
dog's trying to get in her face. Come on. Um. Yeah. No. I think four stories, an issue, and or a collected, along with there'll be like little extras in there. Like any pinups that have been done in association with it'll be included. I'll probably pad it out with a little bit of extra like um 1 page type things. Like we'll definitely make each one
Yeah.
worth it. And I think the hardest thing about the collecteds is just going to be figuring out what to do about the covers. Because, like you said, the covers are they're kind of a big part of it. And the idea of having like multiple stories in one and having to figure out what to do about the cover is probably uh,
Yeah.
kind of a pain in the ass. But I'll worry about that later. So.
So, given that you're a fan of like eerie and creepy, and you've kind of notched that off your bucket list of doing work for each of those magazines, is there a possible future where you kind of see the dark kind of morphing into something like an eerie or creepy?
I mean, I don't know. I sure, I guess. Like, I mean, I've been batting around the idea that when we start doing the collected books of making some kind of host type character to put in there, like, and I just can't decide if I feel like that's too corny or if it's just corny enough, you know.
I I think any of us artists who have had any kind of like remote interest in horror and all that, I think we've all in the back of our minds have been like, I should do a comic with like the funny, goofy kind of scary host.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that's an
absolutely.
idea.
I'm
Um,
amazed that every other comic that comes out isn't like there's not just some terrible knockoff of the Crypt Keeper from the TV show, because that's
yeah,
like where everybody's head goes for that kind of
yeah.
stuff. I you know, I would love to take the dark and do something like an anthology type, like what it's meant to be, that kind of thing. I also don't want the responsibility of putting together an anthology. So I'd rather just do the things and then they get put together as I
Yeah.
see fit. Because I know that like everybody I know that's ever put together an anthology, anybody that's ever like, my hat's off to anybody that
Yeah.
runs that show, because it's such a fucking nightmare.
So, self-publishing a comic alone is almost insurmountable by yourself, and then doing an anthology,
Oh,
having been a part of a couple, having tried to plan a couple myself, you just look at it logistically and you're like, no way. And this is just too much right
dude,
now.
for years, me and a buddy did we did a anthology comic called Empty Bear Naked Vacant. And what it was at the time, my wife and I had a friend who was deaf, and
Okay.
we bought a sign language dictionary so that we could try to learn some
Yeah.
things. And um, so we were putting together this anthology, and we were trying to come up with a name. So we started flipping through this the sign language dictionary, and we came across the sign for empty, bare, naked, vacant. Like, it's just, it could be any of those things. And then we just took that and like made that the name of the anthology. And we
Oh.
did like, I think we did like 4 or 5, but that was just the two of us,
Hmm.
and it felt like a fucking chore like every time. And I still contribute to anthologies all the time, and I mean, I think a lot of times, even when you're not in charge of it, like, you can just feel the tension,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
buzzing around, like, just getting emails and just being like, I'm so sorry you decided to do this to yourself, man. Like, it's
Oh.
so much, no matter how good your intentions are. Like, I mean, you can't control the 50 people you got involved with it. So, and
No,
things happen, people fall off, things happen. And
it's hurting cats to the nth degree.
yeah, yeah.
So
And I'm just like, that's cool, man, but I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to have to deal with that. And I also worry too that because this is like, the dark is something that I work with different writers. I don't go, now I'm going to draw each one differently. Like, I draw them all the same, so I'm
yeah.
always the artist. So I wonder, like, how long before people just start like, well, who fucking cares? Like, they all look the same. This guy draws them, so what's the difference? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day it could grow into something different, but I have to get beyond. If we are being realistic, though, I'm
Realistic. Yeah.
working on the 4th story right now, and I believe Boo Hag came out like 2 or 3 years ago. So it's been a little while. Like, I've averaged about one story a year, basically. And you said like they're 8 to 10 pages long.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. If it was an anthology, it would be way, way down the line.
Okay. Well, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything further you wanted to promote, or if there's any music or comics that you're into right now that you like to, you know, request people check out and recommend.
Huh. Well, uh, look for that Nasquatch book. It'll be on Comixology in a few months.
And if
it'll
links are
be
available for anything, it'll be sure to be tossed all over the post here.
and make sure you go to Free Comic Book Day and get one of those Starburn presents featuring Nasquatch. A Letter to Joe comes out in August from Top Shelf. Do that. I'm working on some other stuff. It'll be out sometime this year. The Nanny, the next, Nanny, the next in the Dark saga, I guess, is will be available next month, I guess. If all goes well, I should have it at Emerald City. If you want to buy copies, and you do, so do that. Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of stuff that I should probably promote, but I'm not. Go to Source Point Press and buy the cabinet, or go to your comic shop and tell them to order the cabinet. It's a good book. I drew it. You should listen to The Armed. It's a collective band out of Michigan, and I think the Detroit area. I really, really, really like that band. It's really good, and they had a new record that came out last year, somewhere in the middle of the year. It's can't remember what it's called. Just look them up, and it's everybody loved it. You know, it's on all these lists and stuff. If that matters to you, there you go. So yeah, I highly suggest The Armed. They're really good, and Snail Mail. I really like that Snail Mail record that came out last year, and I'm trying to think of what else I've been listening to. Honestly, I've been listening to some really terrible horror story podcasting on Spotify that I can't even remember what it's called. So
Don't listen to that.
Yeah, go listen to that. It's like scary stories. What is the name of the books? Like To Tell in the Dark?
Yeah, scary stories to tell in the
So
dark.
this is like scary stories, like foretelling in the dark. Like it's something really similar, you know.
Okay.
It's hosted by a guy called oh shit. Now I can't. I knew it. Now I just remembered. He's supposed to be a crypt keeper type guy, I think.
Okay.
I just remember he goes, "I'm not your granddaddy," so I don't know. I am so far behind on comic reading. I've been trying to get back in the habit of reading in the mornings. I'm catching up on finishing like the last couple of Junji Ito books that I bought. His Frankenstein and the one before that. It's right there. Where's it at? Of course, it's turned the other way. That one too. Shiver, I think is what it's called. I mean, when you talk about horror and short stories, like you can't go wrong with Junji Ito. That guy's good. He's really good, and I like that some of his stuff's like he's got a very typical Japanese style, like, you know, anime kind of style. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know if typical is a word, but like, it's very unassuming, and then until it's not, then it's like, you know, kind of perfect and crazy. But yeah, that and yeah, I can't even remember what all I've read recently.
I think you've given everybody a ton to start
that works.
Through ordering and reading.
Go do that.
So I highly recommend everyone go check the links below the video and follow Kelly on all his social medias, because you'll be able to keep up on all his awesome stuff. And Kelly, thanks for coming on. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me.